I was just more interested in ensuring that there was a platform that had the necessary experts coming on to talk about anything to do with the pandemic COVID-19 and maybe giving some context. That's how Monday Science was born, really, primarily due to what I felt was a need to have accurate information about COVID, about science in general, but particularly around COVID, and having the experts to come and talk about COVID and give some insight and overview. I started Monday Science because I like Mondays. I'm really weird like that. I just think Mondays are great. I don't know. Mondays and Thursdays are my two favorite days, actually.
Science. Technology. Medicine. Health. These four things make the world go round. Without them, we couldn't exist. This is the Monday Science Podcast, a weekly show bringing you the latest research and news in science, technology, medicine, and health, answering your questions or finding experts in the field to answer them. Your host is a pharmacist, an award-winning scientist. She leads her own research group and is the founder of King's College London Fight the Fakes. A tad bit on the qualified side. Welcome to Monday Science. Here's your host, Dr. Bahija Raimi Abraham.
Okay. I think I am live. Okay. That's great. Hello! Hi! I'm struggling with technology. Hello everyone so far. I just hope you can all hear me, which would be great. Hello! Hello, the Black Dementia Company. I'm just letting people know that we are live. So I hope you can all hear me okay. I should probably... Oh. It seems okay, we can hear you. Thank you so much. It's really weird to be, well, firstly on Insta Live. This will be my second Insta Live ever, so that's fun. And also to be celebrating one whole year of Monday Science consistency and having the episodes up, and it's just amazing. So to be honest, today is meant to be a little bit of a ramble of me just being happy that we've achieved 1 year, and also to give some insight, some hot off the press news for Monday Science, so you can know what we've got in store for the next, well, not just the next year, but the next, well, wherever really, the future of Monday Science. I'm frantically trying to multitask to just let people know that we are online. Okay, all done. Hold on. Let's just make sure. You see, this is interesting because obviously some of these parts are edited out. My talking to myself moments is usually edited out from the podcast, but this happens all the time, just where I talk to myself. And yeah. Okay, so now that I'm not distracted anymore, thank you so much to everyone who's connected. My name is Dr. Bahija Raimi Abraham. I am the founder and host of Monday Science. So in addition to all of, I'm a pharmacist and a lecturer at King's College London, as well as being the founder of King's College London Fight the Fakes. And at King's College London, I have my research group called the Raimi Abraham Group. Not the most innovative name, but I've had my research group for a few years now. And with the work that we do, we have many different research themes, but main ones including, essentially, we're a pharmaceutics group. So pharmaceutics is science of dosage form design. So we make medicines. We also try and look and see how we can improve medicines with a particular interest and focus on infectious diseases. And the core pillars of my research is aging and global health. I've wanted to start a podcast for many years, actually. And as with most things, I wanted to start, as with most things, I initially thought to start the podcast with, I didn't really have much of an idea of what I wanted to do, just more knew that I wanted to start a podcast of some sort. I had a couple of potential co-hosts, but things never really took off. And that's not through any fault of anybody's. It just happens like that sometimes, where you can have an idea of what you want to do and then it just doesn't take off because everybody has different schedules and things like that. Then I didn't really think much about the podcast for a very long time, and then Corona happened. 2020 came with a bang. I think for me, with the pandemic, I guess it's really hard to think about timeline right now, but I guess with the pandemic, you know, a lot of scientists, a lot of people actually, so I shouldn't be specific and say scientists, but I think a lot of people were searching for news, searching for information that could help them, you know, with the pandemic and just understand what was going on. For me, I was getting a bit frustrated seeing people who, in my humble opinion, didn't have the necessary credentials talking about COVID, because at the end of the day, if you really think about it, COVID and 2020 was an interesting time because people could position and pivot themselves as experts in something that they really didn't have expertise on, because at the time, in particular, the news just wanted anybody who could appear as an expert to talk. That's probably really bad for me to say, but here we are. I got very frustrated and I thought, well, I'm very mindful. Yes, my research I'm interested in infectious diseases, but I've only really started moving into that the last few years. And also, when we say infectious diseases, you know, there are various different microorganisms. So you've got, if you're talking about infectious diseases, you've got bacteria, fungi, parasites, viruses. For me, I was just more interested in ensuring that there was a platform that had the necessary experts coming on to talk about, you know, anything to do with the pandemic, COVID-19, and maybe giving some context. That's how Monday Science was born, really, primarily due to what I felt was a need to have information about COVID, about science in general, but particularly around COVID, and having the experts to come and talk about, you know, COVID and give some insight and overview. I started Monday Science because I like Mondays. I'm really weird like that. I just think Monday's a great day. I don't know. Mondays and Thursdays are my two favorite days, actually. Yeah, Thursday Science, although you'll see why Thursday is actually my favorite day and what I've done there when I give you some update about Monday Science. But for me, Monday, it's like, yeah, great start to the week. And then Science, because I like science. That's it. Yeah, that's how Monday Science was born. It was really quite daunting, actually, because I challenged myself. The other thing was making sure it was a weekly podcast was to challenge myself to commit to something every week. The first guest we had was Dr. Saskia Popescu, and I remember sending the email very nervous, like, hello, I've got a new podcast, blah, blah, blah. Would you be happy to come on? And she replied straight away and was like, yeah, sounds great. Let's book this in. And, you know, that was Saskia Popescu was my first guest, and it was everything. I guess things flowed on that. I really just want to say thank you to all the guests who have made it possible for Monday Science to be Monday Science. Really grateful for every single one of them, and I can see some of them are on the live now, so thank you so much. And also, you know, Monday Science has a team. So yes, I'm the host, but we have a team. We've had the team has expanded this year, but started off having 3 main people. So that's Jen, who works on the sort of marketing strategy and business development. You would have seen her a little bit when she stepped in to help with the social media as well. Who else we've had? We've had Dagny, Amber, Ibani, Maria, Sarah. We've also had Desi, who was the first Monday Science social media manager as well, Francesca, who also did the podcast writing. So you can see it's been a journey. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to give some stats, but I don't know if people are interested in that. So far we've had over 3,500 downloads. We've got over 200 active listeners on Spotify. So Spotify seems to be our main platform. People want to know this. We've had some Q&A questions. So that's why I'm looking at my laptop. I'm not looking lovingly into the skyline. I'm looking at my laptop to just make sure I get all the stats right. So yeah, we've had over 3,500 downloads, 200 active listeners on Spotify. And actually, that's another thing I want to say thank you to Anchor. Anchor's our hosting platform, which is owned by Spotify, and they've been really supportive. They put us on the Amplifying Black Voices playlist as well, and have been really supportive also on social media to amplify Monday Science. So thank you to them. We've had listeners from all over the world. I did have a plan to read through all the countries, but it's a lot. So we've had ranging from United States, UK, thank you everybody, Ireland, New Zealand, Guernsey, Nigeria, Italy, Romania, Vietnam, Switzerland, Denmark, Bangladesh, Serbia, Iraq, Brazil, Portugal, Botswana, Palestine, Ghana, Macedonia. We've had a full list, and I just want to say thank you so much to all the listeners from around the world. I don't speak many languages well. I'm even trying to show off that I speak no languages well. In fact, I can Portuguese, I know how to say cheese, queijo, that is literally about it. But what I would love to do one day, and we're actually going to be doing this with DMed Collective, so that's something to build up that we'll be working towards, is it would be great to have episodes in like different languages, but we need a host who can speak all those languages. That is not me, unfortunately. So we'll find a way to do that. But thank you so much to everyone. Ciao! Hello, ciao. I used to be able to speak a bit of Italian, but ciao is where we will start and end. Thank you for joining the live. Okay, so in terms of what's next for Monday Science, so you may or may not know, but we've got the Royal Society of Chemistry project, which is ongoing at the moment, and that's been really about trying to showcase and increase conversations about diversity in chemical sciences, and diversity in all aspects. So diversity of the chemists, the people, the scientists, but also diversity in terms of the research and the work that people are doing. And with that, that's been an episode pretty much once a month, and that's going to run up until October. But what we are going to start showcasing are some of the live demonstrations using various things such as 3D printing and others. So you should look out for that. That will be starting in the next couple of months. So as I mentioned, my other favorite day of the week is Thursday. So we're starting something called Thursday Specials. So with Monday Science, we're generally talking about science, technology, and health, latest news, research and topics. And what that has meant, which is good, is that we cover a wide range of topics within those themes. But then I also like to talk about random things such as Marvel Comics and cults and many different things, but which doesn't necessarily fit in with the theme of Monday Science per se. And also just taking on some feedback from our listeners where you guys would like to know a little bit more about the ins and outs of academia, find out a little bit more about what it takes to do a PhD. So I've actually interviewed some of my PhD researchers to talk about their experiences. So we'll be showcasing some of that. So that's where Thursday Specials, you can see Thursday Specials pretty much a bit of a random, let's see what we feel like talking about. That's not necessarily, you know, a scientific theme or topic. So that's going to be starting this week. It wouldn't be, Thursday Specials won't be every Thursday, it'll just be ad hoc, maybe twice a month. So yeah, you'll get a notification when it pops up. That should be really good. We've got future topics that we're going to be covering. So right now we've been doing a lot around women's health. We're going to now, well, we've got still ongoing around women's health, but we're talking about men's health, sickle cell, anemia, blockchain. I know nothing about blockchain, even though my understanding of blockchain is as it relates to falsified medicines and the fact that there could be some potential there in helping to tackle and address fake medicines. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that in a general sense. Cryptocurrency, I know nothing about it, so this is going to be interesting. I mentioned cults. I don't know if it's healthy for me to mention that twice, but I'm going to talk about cults, which is going to be interesting. Very exciting guest coming up for that. Cybersecurity, but also if there's anything that you would like, you can put it in, you can drop us an email, info@mondaysciencepodcast.com. And also, by the way, if you have any questions, you can submit your questions and I will answer them as I go along. So yeah, so topics, we're always interested to know what our audience want to find out. And don't forget, the whole idea of Monday Science is that it's listener led. So as much as I can think of, I can suggest guests and get guests on that I'm interested in their topics. The idea is that if you have any questions, if there's anything you really want to know, just drop us an email, send a message via DM, and then we can look for somebody to answer those questions for you. And that's really why I think Monday Science is quite unique, because, I mean, it's also based off the fact that I would get a lot of my non-scientist friends asking me questions. I was like, oh, I don't know the answer to that, or I'll research and look. So this way you will get to learn as well. So please do get in touch. We had some questions submitted, so I'm gonna answer some of them. So one of the questions was submitted that said, what is one thing you wish you would have known before diving into the podcast? Oh, loaded question. So I wasn't under any illusion that having a podcast would be hard, but I didn't really know what that meant. And in all honesty, when I started Monday Science, even though, as I've mentioned already, it was supposed to try and, engage and want people to answer questions that people may have, I don't think I really understood that people would connect and listen. So that was interesting. And actually Monday Science ended up, because of the interest and because of the engagement, because of the just intrigue, it has ended up becoming more than I imagined and expected. So I think my answer to what I wish I knew before diving into the podcast is maybe knowing a bit more about what it takes to run a podcast. I think when you start, so as I've mentioned, with the things that I do, like for example, having not just the research group, but King's College London Fight the Fakes, it's very important to establish a team. But when you're establishing a team, you kind of need to know what you need, right, within your team. I would say, because I just, dare I say it, I just know how to talk. So things I've had to learn is, editing. Whew, wow, that's not fun. I wish I had a better understanding, because you can read various different things. You can watch YouTube clips to find out how to, have your podcast. But there's a different thing when you actually have a podcast and you're identifying, oh, that's a gap. We don't have a specific skill set. So I wish I had had a bit more foresight to know exactly what would be required to make my podcast successful. The other thing as well is, I think interviewing technique is, so anybody who's listened to the first episode to the current episodes, it's been a journey. Interviewing technique is something that, a lot of people think, again, when they start a podcast, you can just simply talk to people and record that and it will come across fine and it'll be okay. It's not that the case. So so two things: understanding exactly what is required from the team, with the actual people you'd need beyond just reading about it. You can only really know once you start the podcast. And then secondly, interviewing. It's different from how you think it would be before starting the podcast, and having to keep people engaged, keep your guest engaged, as well as hopefully keep the audience engaged with whatever topics you're talking about. It's a very good question. So what's the other thing? What would you say to someone who wants to build their own media platform but is hesitant to get going? I would say just do it. So I guess you can only learn from doing in certain situations. And I do definitely think with podcasting, you can plan as much as you want, but if you can only learn from just doing. So, for example, there was sometime last year, and I had, can you hear my neighbours are chatting outside, sorry. There was sometime last year when I had, we'd have like our weekly plan of what the next episode would be. And I was recording, so I would maybe record in that week for the upcoming week, because I really, especially with COVID, you want everything to be up to date. But within the week of the next episode, I'd actually fallen ill. So I was too ill to record, because it would come across, and it's the things you think about. I was too ill to record, so it would come across in the sound and how I would speak. So I couldn't record that episode. So I would say planning is very important. So firstly, just do it. Just start. Have your plan beforehand, then just start. And then also try and plan as best as you can. So plan your episodes and have a couple of recordings that aren't time sensitive, that you have, as a stopgap, if, let's say, something happens such as illness or, internet goes down or something like that. And also now, I would say, with the increased use of virtual platforms, whereas before, and I don't, because obviously I'm not I guess you could say I am a podcaster, but I'm not really like a traditional podcaster. So, prior to the pandemic, there were loads of different online resources that you could use, and online platforms that were specific for virtual podcast recording, Zencaster being one of them. And then they offered some free, their free service for a while. And then after a while, that service was back to being paid. And I think with the virtual world, you don't necessarily need to, humble opinion, you don't necessarily need to use those podcast specific platforms. You can just, use Zoom or whatever and just convert, because even Zoom now, they have an audio, once you do your recording, it converts specifically to audio and video. So I think there's a lot more opportunities now to start a podcast compared to before. Okay, other question is, what is one podcast interview question that you really love asking and why? For those who would have listened from last year, and also welcome to our new listeners. So the structure last year, 2020 structure, was just straight in, tell us about your research, tell us about yourself, blah, blah, blah. And then sometimes the podcast episodes were news focused or topic focused or guest focused. And on reflection, I felt that whilst that was good, I felt that you weren't getting to know the person, the guest per se, and then also that news segment could be incorporated per episode. I then did actually think, what's the question I'd love to ask people? And a lot of people in lockdown started listening to music more, started reading more, started watching more films. So that's where that question came in, starting from 2021, where I asked each guest I ask, what's their favorite, what's their song of the moment, or what book can they recommend and film. And then we now have a film, well, I wouldn't say film club, but that's what we're working towards, that, we can do virtual film watching together. That'd be great. But we now have a list of the book recommendations on our website, mondaysciencepodcast.com. You can also purchase them through our Amazon affiliate account. And then the songs that have been recommended, we've got a playlist, a Monday Science playlist, which you can access through the website. So you can listen to the various different recommendations. So that for me is something that's been really nice. And, again, from the feedback from our listeners, lets us know that people are reading the books or listening to the songs. Like, oh, that's very interesting. So yeah, that's that. So the next question is, who's my favorite guest? Who's been my favorite guest? Well, I think she's actually on the live. It's my mum. I'm so sorry. So my favorite guest of all time has been my mum. It was a very interesting journey to interview, get an opportunity to interview my mum, on the podcast. It was really good. And yeah, I would say that and also curating the dementia series and what that meant to me, what that meant to my mum, and the impact that has had. I think that's been one of the most rewarding sides of the whole podcast. But yeah, it was just really cool. And also, as those who listen, that's episode 18, if anyone's interested to listen to that. I think what was interesting with getting the questions for putting together the questions for the interview, and then at the end my mum asked me a question. I wasn't ready for that, so she's like, oh yeah, when my mum asked me a question, I won't spoil what happened. I was like, oh okay, non-scripted, interesting. So yeah, so that was a very important episode for me as well. And okay, so the last question is, how do I come up with the topics for the podcast? Well, as I mentioned, so the podcast is listener led. So a lot of the questions, especially around COVID, are submitted from listeners, usually DM or emails. So that's where a lot of the COVID questions come in as a result of that. Initially, the add-on things would also be just things that I'm interested in. I'm like, oh, I've read this article, it'll be interesting to talk about that. And then now that we also have a team of podcast researchers as well, and STEAM, so science, technology, engineering, arts and maths researchers. So they also give some insight. One of the criticisms that I wouldn't say criticism, sorry, maybe feedback we've had around the podcast is quite biology focused this year. It's been yes, we've got the chemical sciences, but there's been a lot of kind of biology side of things. So we've taken on board that feedback, and that's why I said we want to have a little bit more tech. We had a few tech interviews last year, but we want to have a bit more tech, cybersecurity, something a little bit different. But one of the challenges with a podcast is that you can email, the amount of people we email to ask to come on the podcast versus the number that actually say yes is the ratio is very small. It's very small. This is why one is so grateful for all the guests who actually decide to come on and say yes. So yeah, those are all the questions. I've said all that I needed to say. If anyone does have any questions, you can put it in the chat, but it's also okay if you don't. You could always submit the questions via our DM for Instagram and Twitter, but you can also drop us an email, info@mondaysciencepodcast.com. So if we don't have any questions, let me just scroll up, waving. You can see I'm not very good with all of this. Okay, So I seem to have answered all the questions. Well, thank you so much. I'm not one to do lives and live streaming so often. So this has been a good experience, and I would like to do some more. So you should expect some more lives. But as ever, continue to tune in to Monday Science every Monday, and then look out for the Thursday special. Thank you so much. Look out for the Thursday special episode on Thursday. And we shall see you soon, Thank you very much. I'm going to try and close.
You've been listening to the Monday Science Podcast, a weekly show bringing you the latest research and news in science, technology, medicine, and health. We hope you've gotten some useful and thought-provoking info from the show, and we hope you had fun along the way. We know we did. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on our website at www.mondaysciencepodcast.com. Shoot us an email at info@mondaysciencepodcast.com. Find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Monday Science, and access episode summaries at mondayscience.medium.com. See you next week on the Monday Science Podcast.